It is Friday, January 7th. Let's talk PlayStation. Hello everyone, welcome back. It's only been 1 week since the new year has started, and there's already a ton going on, so we have a lot to go over. Let's start off as always with our PlayStation Plus reminder. The January games are now available, so go check them out, download them, add them to your library. Also for PlayStation Now, the January lineup is live, and that is, I think this is one of the first months in a long time where there's no games with an expiration date, so all these games are going to stay on the service indefinitely, and that includes Mortal Kombat 11, Final Fantasy 12, The Zodiac Age, Fury Unleashed, Unturned, Kerbal Space Program Enhanced, and Super Time Force Ultra, which, you know, it's an okay month, right? It's just the problem here is that whether it's good or bad, everybody's just sort of, you know, we're waiting now, right? Patiently waiting for this alleged revamped PlayStation Plus type service with PS Now, the branding at least being dropped. So whether it's good or bad, we're just sort of waiting for that right now. But anyway, moving on to our first news story. Of course, one of the larger things from this past week was the, not reveal, but official naming of PlayStation VR2. So again, that was during Sony's CES 2022 presentation. We already covered that in a video before this one, so most of the rumors were correct in terms of specs. The name was a bit of a, not surprise, but again, we have a real name now for it. Really, the additional piece of news that we have here is that Stephen Totilo of Axios did reach out to PlayStation PR and asked about if the headset will release this year and also about backwards compatibility. He put this on Twitter where he says that PlayStation PR did not respond at this time. They said they have nothing further to announce at the moment, so stay tuned. And this goes back to what I've said on numerous accounts in the video we touched on for CES, but also any other times this topic comes up, don't expect it. I know people think it's easy or that it should be expected, but you have to keep in mind, again, there's just a lot more, it's vastly more complicated with VR, right? Where you've got various different headsets and you've got all these games spread across these headsets, and they all interpret the tracking data and those input methods differently. And so with PlayStation VR, again, you're going from a camera-based setup, move controllers, DualShock 4s, aim controllers. You're taking that and going to one headset, inside-out tracking, new Sense controllers that have less buttons, and so it dramatically complicates having to, you know, create some sort of API that matches the positional data that those old PSVR games are looking for. In theory, that is something that they could do, but again, it seems like a massive pain. Even starting a PSVR game, right away they're going to ask for, you know, a PS4 camera. It's like you got to do something for that. You got to do something for how each different game interprets that data. I'm going to guess that they have to say, yeah, we can't support this software, and that's why one of the rumors that we have is that Sony is seeking out some of the higher profile PSVR games and developers and perhaps suggesting or pushing them in a direction of doing a port for the new one. And keep in mind, if they didn't actually answer this, or if they're not being upfront about it, you know, if it was there, they would probably say that, that would be one of the first things that they would say, right? Now they're kind of in a tough spot where they have to, you know, awkwardly either answer this in an interview or put it up as part of a PlayStation VR2 FAQ on the PS blog once we have a full reveal, and that, you know, 30-minute live stream still doesn't say if it plays old games, and then once a FAQ comes up, it'll say, no, there's no support, right? I imagine that's how it'll go, but just keep in mind, do not expect it. It's not as easy as one would think. Probably not going to happen, but again, we would, let's hope for the best. If there was backwards compatibility, the way I see them maybe getting by is still requiring, you know, move controllers or a DualShock 4. Again, it would be on a game-by-game basis. Again, it seems like a pain, but again, don't expect it. Now, on a more positive note for PSVR 2, we did see Horizon Call the Mountain, the one PSVR 2 game that was announced. And, well, for that game, the former senior world designer on Horizon Forbidden West, Chris James, over on Twitter said, and I quote here, "This has been in the works for a while. I didn't work on it, but I promise you this will change what AAA means for VR. It's amazing." Granted, he's not at Guerrilla right now, and he didn't work on this game, but he was there at a time, so he presumably has firsthand experience seeing what was being built and the progress that was being made before he left. And I mean, it's a really exciting prospect to see what Guerrilla and Firesprite are cooking up for, you know, a next generation VR headset on PS5. And the thing is with VR, I'm sure a lot of you know, but across various headsets, not just PSVR, yeah, like a lot of the games they're short experiences, static experiences where you don't really get to do much or interact much with the environment. It sucks, but the thing is, actually, the one good thing about PSVR, the current headset, is that while it is, outdated and the Move controllers are kind of a pain, that is the one headset where, in terms of the amount of titles, there is a lot of AA, AAA-esque experiences or traditional games that you can play from start to finish that are, pretty full scale in terms of the amount of, the amount of gameplay that's actually available in them, right? And being a full-scale VR experience. Hearing that Sony is still committed to the space, which we already knew. In fact, they've been, investing in VR for about 20-something years when it comes to head-mounted displays. It's just great to see that the commitment has always been there, and you need the software to prove that it's viable, right? Or to do a full-scale game and prove to other publishers that, hey, this is financially viable. So to have Horizon call them out and possibly be a title like that next to, say, a benchmark of, Half-Life Alyx, which that is definitely a benchmark AAA VR game, you want Horizon to be close to that or definitely exceed it. And Horizon is the kind of IP where I think that could be made a reality. But we don't have any idea what this game is really going to be. It could very well be a shorter, not full-scale game, but I hope that it's actually more in line with what we're hearing about, that it's really going to redefine AAA in the VR space. I'm hopeful. Now, moving on to our next news story, what was also part of Sony's very small PlayStation presentation during CES was the revelation that Ghost of Tsushima has sold 8 million copies worldwide, which is a great number. It's fantastic. I'm so happy to see how well Sucker Punch is doing. I'm sure a lot of you feel the same. The game definitely deserves all the respect and success that it's gotten. But the crazy thing about the story is that it's a very, it's a milestone, right? But it should kind of come and go, and that wasn't really the case. What happened on Twitter was the former director of Days Gone, Jeff Ross, had retweeted an article of Game Informer announcing this news, where he says, and I quote, "At the time I left Sony, Days Gone had been out for a year and a half and a month and sold over 8 million copies. It's since gone on to sell more and then 1 million plus on Steam. Local studio management always made us feel like it was a big disappointment." Now, when I screen capped this, it was at 5,000 likes, 1,000 retweets. It's way more now, so this reached a lot of people. And more so, Jeff Ross himself has been very candid about the whole thing, where he's been responding to a lot of people on Twitter, about this. For example, Sean Layden was actually very supportive of the whole thing. And one person had reached out and said, do you think the management shakeup back in 2019 might have played a factor? Jeff Ross responds saying, things were great under Sean. Somebody says, that's unfortunate, maybe there's better leadership there now. Jeff Ross says, nope. Somebody said, local studio management being those at Bend or America, or was it globally? Jeff says, local for sure, don't know what kind of heat they were getting from above. Somebody asked about the Days Gone 2 pitch, did they think it was a good idea? What was their reaction? He said they never even read the pitch. And then somebody asked, when it comes to sales, reviews, what was Sony's response there, or what was the reasoning for it? Jeff Ross says, wasn't ever explained well. Somebody says, anything related to the rumor about the sequel pitch being turned down. The first game was good, but I really like it, and a second game would have benefited the studio learning from their lessons based on the first game. And Jeff Ross says, exactly, I was planning on building on top of the original for a kick-ass sequel. Even the first Killzone got a 70 on Metacritic, but the sequel roared back with a 91. You gotta crawl before you can walk, and walk before you can run. Somebody said Sony also wants high Metacritic scores. Jeff Ross says, yep, already acknowledged that, but the grief we got was about sales, not the scores. Now, that was just on Twitter. That was one little isolated thing where he was responding to a lot of people. The following day, basically, so yesterday, he was on David Jaffe's podcast with also the former director and writer of Days Gone, John Garvin, and we got some, more elaboration on what was really discussed, because, again, this tweet really blew up. So he reiterates local management was the problem, and he does actually say it wasn't Jim Ryan or Herman Hulst exactly, but when Sean left, basically Days Gone was dead, was the sentiment that he was feeling. Jeff Ross feels it was probably a portfolio balance in regards to having The Last of Us around having that game still around with the second game coming out, but he just wanted to be told that directly since they weren't really actually telling him that much. It seems like communication was a big problem here. He reiterates that the pitch didn't make it past local management, so it's something where in terms of how it wasn't read, I guess it just didn't go very far beyond this local management problem that he keeps bringing up. He does also say that the management had humored the idea of another siphon filter or perhaps working on an open world resistance game, though these weren't serious, so just relax. It's just something where the way he described it, it sounds like they were more deflecting Days Gone entirely instead of again, they were humoring those other ideas. But he also says that the work with Naughty Dog, that goes back to the Bloomberg report that we heard about where Ben was being pushed into the work for Naughty Dog and that they wanted to do their own thing. So Jeff Ross, and keep in mind, he was there up until December 2020 or something. He was there a lot longer than John Garvin, or at least 1 year longer than John Garvin, because he left back in 2019, right after Days Gone shipped. But he says the work with Naughty Dog was more of a no-pressure situation since the team wasn't actively working on anything in terms of a completely greenlit project. So the team was a bit restless and wanted to work on something, and that is standard industry practice. So he's making it sound like it wasn't really a bad thing that some of the team was working with Naughty Dog. It seems like they wanted to do that, but that's for the most part what we know. Boy, there's a lot of layers to this one, so let's try and really unpack this, because I think the first thing to note right away is that this isn't exactly an isolated scenario. Not to take away from this situation itself with Days Gone and a possible sequel and all that stuff, but when it comes to John Garvin and Jeff Ross being so candid, that's the difference. We're hearing about it. Many developers probably have a story or anecdote or time in their career that is like this, where they shipped the product, it was reviewed okay but not fantastic, they didn't get a sequel, or maybe something else entirely different, but working on a project that is a multi-year thing and having something like this happen, it's a very emotionally charged experience, and we just don't often hear about these things. Not to take away from what's going on here, but that's just the point I'm trying to get across, because obviously this is something where it's disappointing to hear about how this all went down. Local management never even really sent it too far up above, but I mean, one can really make the case and argue that if Sony did want a sequel, they would have certainly pushed for one. So whether it was local management or the 2019 restructure, I mean, if they wanted one, they would have probably got it. The more complicated thing is that we also don't necessarily know how Sony has, how do they really calculate a game's success, right? Because I know it sounds dumb to say 8 million sales or 10 million sales or a lot of player engagement isn't exactly enough, but there's a lot of factors that go into it. The average selling price, the amount of player engagement, the critical reception, how that reception plays out over time. Sony's probably seeing all those things. We have no idea how they weight certain things against one another, but going back to the more human aspect of it, that's how John Garvin and Jeff Ross tend to look at these things. You ship a product, this happens, and then your mind wanders. You think, oh, well, Killzone got a sequel. That was kind of a similar situation. Oh, look at them celebrating Ghost of Tsushima. What? Why didn't we get that, right? It's got to be a really frustrating experience. So it sucks. And clearly, yeah, Sean seemed to be a really great support channel for his time at Sony. But obviously the company is a lot different now with how it approaches these things, and for better or worse, this was the result of that change, which it seems like it was still largely focused on the Days Gone IP in particular. So, Bend is still around, they're getting a new IP. From what it sounds like, maybe the Naughty Dog angle wasn't as bad as it was made out to be. We still don't exactly know everything, right? We have to remember we're on the outside looking in. We're hearing, anecdotes from some people and their real, frustrations and opinions and, anecdotes of what happened. But it's still something where we can't make a complete conclusion other than what I would assume is still a business thing that just it hurt people involved, and I can't exactly say I'm surprised, or I wouldn't put it past, John or Jeff for feeling the way they do. It's just, the reality of what is kind of a lame situation. Anyway, moving on to our next story, let's talk about The Last of Us Remake, factions, and possibly a Part 2 Director's Cut, which would be the first time that we're hearing about that. This is coming from Tom Henderson, well-known freelance writer across various publications, and also well-known for putting out good information before. He says on Twitter, heard from multiple people now that The Last of Us Remake is nearly finished and could release during the latter half of 2022. He then follows that up with The Last of Us 2 multiplayer and The Last of Us 2 Director's Cut. I've heard they are both coming, but I don't know exactly when or how. And he then speculates it could be a good compromise to release those this year if God of War got delayed to, say, Q1 2023, but that is just speculation on his part. And yes, this is the first time we're hearing about a Part 2 director's cut, which is interesting because that might actually give us an idea of how they, say, release or monetize this Factions game, because we don't necessarily know if it will be, say, a free-to-play game and it's just got a bunch of, seasonal updates and cosmetics and things from there, and that's how they'll monetize it, or if it's more of a premium, separate paid thing that you'll be able to buy off the PlayStation Store and at retail, or if, say, it's free with Part 2 owners, and let's say it coincides with the Director's Cut, where Director's Cut owners can get bonus content or some sort of starter pack and a cosmetics package in the game. You know what I mean? Like, just how would they do that? Because when you look at Part 2 right now, it got a patch for PS4 when played on PS5, so it runs at 60 FPS. With Ghost of Tsushima and Death Stranding, their Director's Cuts had a lot of new content. So you can't really do a Part 2 Director's Cut unless there's something there beyond DualSense features, and so maybe that's just how they could go about doing it, because otherwise it's like a Part 2 Director's Cut isn't entirely necessary outside of just DualSense features. So maybe that's how they would go about doing that. And if all these games released this year, that would be a lot of The Last of Us. But this kind of goes back to my predictions video on Tuesday, where the one prediction that I had was all those games getting revealed but not necessarily released. Some of those, though, I do feel should get released within this year, because we do have to look at the back half of this year and realize that there isn't really much. We assume God of War will be a late 2022 game, but like Tom says, if it does, say, get delayed, which I don't expect, but if it did, let's say, that there's going to be something probably planned for release this year that we don't know about just yet, or that doesn't have a confirmed release date. I would guess that at least one of these Last of Us projects are going to be released sometime this year, and I guess if a director's cut comes, that would be a good time to also do Factions if that's planned in terms of the monetization aspect for those games. But anyway, while we're talking about Naughty Dog and going back to that CES presentation, Tom Holland did take the stage to talk about the Uncharted movie from PlayStation Productions, and we actually saw a full 2-minute clip of that plane cargo fight scene, which I actually thought it looked pretty good. It's about what I expected, though. It's just an action-packed movie, and it looks like a fun watch. Still up in the air if it's going to have the true feeling and spirit of Uncharted like the games, but I mean, come on, it still looks fun. I have no doubt that it's probably going to be, good at cheesy action movie, which Uncharted is a good, cheesy action game. I mean, it is, and that there's nothing wrong with that. It's fun to play. It's feel good, and you get all those epic moments. And if the movie can do that, I think at the very least it could be fun watch. So far from that one scene, I'm feeling more positive about it. Next up, it was recently discovered in a beta version of the Discord app that PSN functionality is finally starting to get built in. Slowly, it seems, because right now the only thing that we can see in this beta version is the PSN logo showing up for connected services, and then if you were to, look through the code, it seems like one function you can do is display PS4 and PS5 games that you're playing to your Discord friends, and that's it. And that seems like pretty crude implementation. There's not really much beyond that as far as we can see, but you would assume that there's probably going to be a bit more based on the SIA blog post from last year, where it sounded like there's going to be a lot tighter of integration being implemented. So hopefully that is the case. I mean, I would like a full-blown Discord application where you really get the full functionality tailored to the console, but I would also be curious as to if Sony really wants to do that, because that would cannibalize the basic PSN voice and messaging system, unless they want that to happen. But at the very least, we should be seeing this sometime soon, right? Because that blog post did mention it would be early 2022, and that's where we are. So it shouldn't be much longer to start seeing this. For our next story, 505 Games has confirmed that Death Stranding Director's Cut is coming to PC this spring for the Steam and Epic Games Store, and it will support Intel's Xe super sampling, which they didn't actually answer if you're going to be able to upgrade from a base copy of the game if you already purchased it. And this is 505 Games we're talking about here, so because they're the ones that are handling the publishing on PC. So this may not be something that Sony is involved with when it comes to maybe enabling some sort of upgrade path. But they do say that they'll have some answers for everybody by the end of this month. So I would expect maybe bad news there, because it does, the way it initially appeared was separate store listings from the base game, and, you know, it's the PC environment. Like, there should be a simple path here, but questionable with 505, so we'll see how that one pans out. Moving on, we got yet another new trailer for Horizon Forbidden West. This one is about the tribes in the game, which, you know, the last 1 or 2 months we've seen Guerrilla talk about the tribe members and, you know, the settlements and how they're larger, expanded, how they're more populated. You can see all the, you know, tribe members walking around and doing their own thing, and they're distinguishable from one another, and there's more tribes later in the game that are very powerful and hostile, but we're seeing more and more of Horizon on a weekly basis because the game is getting closer to being released, and I would guess that we're probably going to get one final state of play, which might include perhaps, you know, a long, rough cut of gameplay of, let's say, 10-15 minutes like we saw for Ratchet or Demon Souls, right? That might be the kind of game. Well, this is the kind of game where I think really warrants that right before, like 1 or 2 weeks before, which, if that's the case, we should be looking forward to it sometime by the end of this January, which would be nice. I would like that for sure. Getting into our next news story, it looks like we may possibly have another cross-save PlayStation issue of some kind, where with Genshin Impact, there was a recent update that made it very problematic to claim rewards based on how your account was made. So the way this works, for those that do not know, is that if you made your account on PlayStation, then you have to buy the Battle Pass on PlayStation, and I think we all know why that is the case, unfortunately. But you could do that, you know, buy the content and then play on PC, claim your rewards on PC, do whatever. Now, after this recent update, you can't actually do that. What happens is that the game tells you have to go and claim that reward on PlayStation if you earned it. And then if you do that, you can go back to PC and play it no problem. So it's very weird that there's a message even prompting you to say, hey, you bought this on PlayStation, you got to go back and claim it on that particular hardware, and then you can go back and, you know, cross-save, use the content that way. Very strange, especially because, well, the content was already purchased, right? It's, you know, Sony got what they wanted out of that transaction, so it doesn't make any sense as to why there would be why they would block it there unless they care about your playtime or staying engaged on PlayStation. It's even weirder that this doesn't appear to be the problem with any other cross-save games, from what we know when it comes to using the content or claiming rewards within other games. So it seems like a very weird, possibly isolated issue that could be rectified. But again, there's, you know, in-game prompts telling you that, hey, this is, you know, why you can't claim this. Very strange. I wouldn't say it's Sony's fault just yet, but, you know, then again, we know the underlying issue of the cross-save clause that they have in place, and why not every single game offers cross-play. So it's very weird, but there's a conflicting reason when you look at other games and this one in particular. So I don't know. It's very weird, but we'll see if it gets fixed if enough noise is made about this issue. Next up, we have some sales data for Japan in terms of how many consoles were sold there in 2021. This data provided by Famitsu, handed over to GamesIndustry.biz. We learned that Nintendo Switch sold 5.3 million units in Japan throughout all of 2021. And next to that was, well, not quite next to it, but PlayStation 5 sold 940,000 units. That would be across PS5, disc, and digital. And then next would be Xbox Series S and X, where those platforms sold a combined total of 95,000 units. And actually, PS4 sold about 101,000 units, something like that. So slightly over both Xbox Series consoles, but that's not entirely surprising. I mean, the whole hierarchy here is not at all surprising, because keep in mind, PS5, while it looks incredibly disappointing when it comes to sales, I mean, they can't meet demand everywhere. We've kind of been over this before. I know it's kind of a hot topic when it's presented of how bad PS5 is doing over there, but they're just not sending that many consoles over there. And why would they? Because that's a territory that historically we've now seen that they're moving away from traditional console play. So while I'm sure they could easily do more than 900,000, they're not going to, even if they provided enough consoles, they're not going to like outsell Nintendo Switch, which is, you know, a hybrid machine. It speaks to that market's preference when it comes to mobile or handheld play. So not entirely surprising numbers, to be honest. It's how things are nowadays. Maybe this year will be better, or 2023 should be a lot better once demand is met. We'll see. But even if it is, I think we could also probably say that PS5 might end up being the worst performing home console in Japan throughout PlayStation history, which is just the way it is. Next up, it was recently confirmed that Ubisoft Plus is coming to Xbox, which is Ubisoft's month-to-month subscription-based service, kind of like EA Play, where for that publisher, you get access to a back catalog of about 100 or so games. And then I believe not for all games, but some of them, or maybe for Ubisoft, it's all of them, but day and date releases on the service, and then all DLC is included. So that service is finally coming to Xbox, separate from Game Pass. And then next to that announcement was Rainbow Six Extraction launching on Game Pass, but it's still, for Ubisoft Plus, that would be separate. But the news here is that Push Square reached out to Ubisoft about it possibly coming to PlayStation, and right now they have nothing to announce, which doesn't rule out the service entirely. In fact, I believe EA Play, or at the time it was called EA Access, that did not come to PlayStation until a little bit after Xbox as well. And right now, well, ongoing Ubisoft Plus has been on PC for a while. Now it's coming to Xbox, and I would imagine it'll probably come to PlayStation eventually. So maybe there's some sort of 6 or 12-month exclusivity agreement between Ubisoft and Microsoft, not sure, but I would imagine it would come at some point. Just right now, that is not the case. Moving on to our next news story, in a conversation with Edge Magazine, the well-known From Software designer Hidetaka Miyazaki was asked about the Demon's Souls remake, if he's played it, how the team felt about it, and he had a pretty interesting quote in regards to that particular game where he says the team did feel pressure. He says, yes, I'm pretty sure our graphics creation staff felt that pressure more than anyone else. He goes on to say, and not just with Elden Ring, but with all of our games that we make, graphical fidelity is not something we put as a top priority. What we ask for on the graphic side depends on the system and requirements of the game itself, and it takes less priority compared to the other elements of development. He goes on to say he hasn't played the remake, but that's mostly due to how he doesn't play his older games, and that, he's apologetic to the graphics team. They certainly felt the pressure from that one in particular. And I can't really blame him. I mean, the thing is, he does point it out pretty clearly there. Those games are not really, the most graphics intensive by any stretch, right? They are certainly gameplay focused, and there's nothing wrong with that. Most developers should obviously focus on the gameplay department, but with the Demon's Souls remake, that is one where the very goal of that game is to lift it up from PlayStation 3 to now PlayStation 5. So basically, apart from fine-tuning gameplay mechanics, which for the most part they didn't really touch that in the Demon's Souls remake, outside of the directionality of where you can roll away, the gameplay is exactly the same in terms of hitboxes and all that stuff. So really, it was Bluepoint just doing their magic in terms of visuals, and that's the one PS5 game where I always remind people, it's always a complaint of oh, next gen's not really here. There's no true next gen games. There's not many examples, but one of them is Ratchet, the other one is Demon's Souls. I mean, Demon's Souls is a looker. It is a gorgeous looking game, it really is, and that is one title where it really differentiates itself from a visual point of view, right? Principally underneath it's a PS3 game, but visually that game is breathtaking. Next up, it looks like the ESA has confirmed there will be no in-person E3 event this year, and more so, they have not confirmed if there will be a digital-only E3, so it's really up in the air in terms of what will or will not happen to E3 this year. And over on Twitter, there's been some murmurings that maybe this was always planned, and it wasn't exactly due to the new COVID variant, where business analyst Mike Futter says this is a spin. I heard from sources in mid-November that the ESA abandoned their dates for the Los Angeles Convention Center. So possibly they may have always planned on not doing an in-person event because, most publishers are now really walking away from E3. That's why in the last 3-4 years, when was the first year that they did when they opened it up to the public? Whenever that was the case, that was somewhat recent, and that was their idea of kind of transforming that show into being less about trade and more about celebrating games in some way, right? We just weren't really sure how they were turning it or what direction they were taking it, but clearly it's up in the air right now. I really want to see what they do or do not have planned, because I still will always admit I miss the old traditional E3. It's just not really a thing anymore. Most publishers are now realizing that the ESA needs them more than they need it. So yeah, E3 is not, it's not dead, but what we know of it is pretty much gone, I would say, at this point. The one upside, though, is that events in general are not over, of course. So Jeff Keighley also confirmed the Summer Game Fest is back for this summer, which will probably also be largely online focused. And there's always been talks of people bringing up that Sony patent about PSX I don't know why people continue to bring this up, because it seems very clear that for Sony, where they're taking the pandemic very seriously, which is a good thing, they're probably not going to be doing anything in person anytime soon. And granted, that PSX patent actually had a lot of different use cases or ways that it can be approached. So PSX, that's probably not coming back anytime soon either. Disappointing, sure, but I mean, let's not get our hopes up. We're still going to be, we pretty much are in a world right now where it's live streams, blog posts, and press releases. They work and they're very cheap. Now, with all that said, it is time for Let's Talk Plus, the weekly Let's Talk PlayStation giveaway where one of you can win a $10 PSN code. I would like to congratulate this viewer right here. I'll be contacting you very soon via email or Twitter, and if you would like to win a $10 PSN code, it's very easy. You can follow the link down below. Supporting this channel, a number of ways can gain you an entry, and I'll announce the winner next week because I'm trying to help pay for your games. Those are all the stories that I wanted to talk about with you all from this past week, and our Tuesday video was PS5 predictions for 2022. So we do that every year. I graded my predictions from 2021 and 10 new ones for this current year. And also, because of the PSVR2 kind of announcement, we also covered that. So as a reminder, you can go watch that for everything that we learned and my quick impressions. But otherwise, that's it. So that concludes this week's episode of Let's Talk PlayStation. I'm Ryan Benecki. Thank you all so much for talking with me, and I will see you all next Friday.